Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofrumento, and I know from interacting with so many of you listeners that there's one topic that anytime we talk about it here on the show, you all eat it up because it's something that we can't ignore as entrepreneurs. And that topic is productivity, and we'll lump in with it time management. Those two things are so intertwined, and ultimately, they're what's going to decide what we accomplish or what we don't accomplish in our lives, in our businesses, in our relationships, in our fitness, and literally anything. We have to manage time. It is the only and the scarcest resource that we all have on this planet. And that's why today I've been so excited about this conversation, because we have got a brilliant entrepreneur and software engineer who has built something that when I read the reviews of this tool, people are saying it's literally changing my life. So let me tell you all about today's guest and entrepreneur. His name is Jacob Barnes. Jacob is a software engineer turned entrepreneur who is passionate about using time effectively to create a fulfilling and rewarding life. He got his start in entrepreneurship at just 22 years old, working on what was a side project with his twin brother to address their own time management pain points. Now, 5 years later, that same side project has turned into their full-time jobs. Through his work, Jacob shares his passion for living intentionally and helping others do the same. His tool, FlowSavvy, is incredible. I'm not going to tell you about it because I want to hear him talk about it. So with all of that said, I'm excited about this one. Let's dive straight into my interview with Jacob Barnes. All right, Jacob, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Brian. It's good to be here. And I'm really excited to talk about productivity as well. As a good intro. I know these listeners, these are the people that have the mindset for what we're talking about. So I'm excited for it.
Heck yeah. It's funny. I often say on the air, I'm like, you're preaching to the choir, because that's the thing. Right. When you get entrepreneurs together, we all think about these same things, but very few people, Jacob, are launching these types of solutions into the marketplace. And I would argue it's a combination of skills, but also mindset and determination and all the other things. So before we get to all that stuff, take us beyond the bio. Who's Jacob? How'd you start doing all these cool things?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like Brian said, I am a software engineer turned entrepreneur. I always thought I was going to be just a software engineer and just doing that for the rest of my life. I really enjoy software engineering, but I quickly turned into the entrepreneur world, did a couple internships, and then did 1 year of a full-time job. And then that's when this business took over. And so quickly switched into that. And it's been a really good learning experience. I'm really passionate about this topic, time management, productivity. I'm sure we're going to talk about that a lot, but it's fun to have that combination of the two, that intersection of the two, what I'm passionate about and what the business is in. And aside from that, I love music, dancing, and really into canyoneering as well. I'm out here in Utah, so lots of canyoneering, rappelling, outdoor stuff.
Yeah, I love that, Jacob. I love how, to me, what's really clear about your marketing language and the way that you talk about FlowSavvy, and even just hear the way you talk about your intro here in this podcast episode, is it's so clear to me that you view time as this one big bundle of an amazing thing that we get to spend and we get to use on life, not just business. Business is one aspect of that, and it's intertwined in the way you talk about yourself. It's intertwined in the way that FlowSavvy talks about the way that we can make the most of our time. Talk to us about where this fundamental attitude towards time even comes from.
Oh my goodness, we're gonna get deep fast, okay? So I have just always felt like I guess it's a little bit of imposter syndrome when you're in the professional world and everyone's obviously being very professional and businessy, and it just always felt a little, I don't know, it just felt like a little wrong to me, because my focus is on being happy all the time. And you can be happy at work, that's not what I'm saying, but my focus is on that. And so I want to make the most of my time. And then this is why I say we're going to get deep fast, but I'll keep it high level. I lost someone very close to me, like 4-ish years ago. And that really made me realize I do not have time to be being lax about relationships and just telling people how I feel about them, using time well, using that quality time. So that's a constant reminder for me. So yeah, it's something that's very, very important to me. It's not just a business thing. It's trying to make the most out of every second you have with the people you're around as well.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing those insights, Jacob, because for you, it really is real. And for all of us in our own lives, whether it's in the good times, in the bad times, in the challenging times, all of that, this is really what determines what we make of our lives, is because our life is just a collection of time, and hopefully we're spending it in all the right ways. And that's why when I think about, us as entrepreneurs, we love time because we have goals and we want to do things and we want to accomplish things. They all take time, but we're also balancing all the other things. A lot of entrepreneurs or beginner entrepreneurs, maybe it's a side hustle, or if you're a full-time entrepreneur, for the first time ever, you don't have a boss, you don't have anyone else who's telling you how to spend that time. We have to make those executive decisions. And that's why I think for most of us as entrepreneurs, we've studied all different ways of being productive, of managing our time. I'm a big fan of batching, for example. You and I are recording this on a Tuesday. I do all my podcast interviews on Tuesdays, just 8 of them back to back to back. That's one of the ways that I'm productive, Jacob. Talk to me about the different ways you've studied and tried to be productive, and all the different strategies that you've explored along the way.
Sure. Yeah. So I started out on my productivity journey as a student. And so what I would do is I would have my Apple Notes. I literally just started with my notes file, and I would list out my different classes, and then every 2 weeks I would go into the syllabus or whatever for all of my classes, list out all of the assignments I had for all of those classes. That was my start. It was purely a to-do list, about as simple as you can get. That worked really well for me, honestly. Like sometimes I feel like people try to use way too many tools, and it gets a little overwhelming, and you're constantly switching between tools. So I really liked that start. It was very simple. When I started getting a little bit more busy and had to be more intentional about how I'm planning out my time, I would take that same list and I would just put it into my calendar. I guess first I would take the list and then put a time next to everything on that list, how long I thought it was going to take. And then I would block out that time on my calendar. So now we're getting into time blocking, which is now my favorite productivity method. But time blocking is where you put something into the calendar. You say, this is the exact time that I'm going to work on this. So very similar to batching that you're talking about, where you're dedicating a whole day to doing this specific type of task. Time blocking is a little bit more granular. So we're going to say, like, from 1 to 3 p.m., I'm going to study for my math class. And then from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m., or like 3 to 4, I'm going to play guitar, something like that. It's a little bit more granular, so you can see how it can get overwhelming fast. Like imagine you have a full calendar and you've got, you planned out your entire week down to the minute. That's awesome. But as soon as something comes up or something changes, you now have to go redo your entire time blocking. That's actually where the idea for FlowSavvy, the business I'm working on right now, came from. And so time blocking is a really effective method. Another one that's very close that a lot of people like to use is time boxing. And this gets closer to the de-theming or batching as well, where you're using a little bit bigger boxes and you're just saying, I'm going to work on these tasks until this time, and then I'm going to stop doing that. So usually you'd have like the same boxes every day and just say, I'm going to do homework from this time, and then I'm going to do personal stuff from this time. And when you get to the end of that, you stop. You have to move on. So it's not task based. It's more, it's a little bit closer to batching, and you stick to those blocks. So time blocking is my favorite though. And that's how we got our start in FlowSavvy.
Yeah, Jacob, I love that overview. I guess I'm going to interject this into our conversation right now, which is I've never personally used time blocking. I have tried and I've thought about it, but I'm going to introduce this into the conversation because it's fun for you to be able to directly address this, which for all of us as entrepreneurs, we face it. And here's my counterpoint. So on the surface level, it seems to make perfect sense to me, Jacob, because, for example, you and I had scheduled to do this interview today at this time. There's no way I'd miss it because I have an appointment appointment with you. I'm not just going to blow you off. I'm not going to stand you up. And so I'm really good at adhering to my calendar when it comes to meeting other people. But for some reason, we could call it discipline. We could call it a lot of different labels. But when it comes to an appointment with myself, which is essentially what you're talking about, putting on our calendars an appointment to do something. The truth is, Jacob, if I'm sitting in a coffee shop, I can look at my calendar and say, I should be doing this, but there's 5 other things that I could be doing. Talk to me about, I don't know if it's discipline, mindset, it's probably all of the above, and then a lot of other things. Talk to us about the importance of putting it on your calendar at a set time, sticking to that calendar, and how to avoid that messy trap that all of us entrepreneurs and people fall into of, I'm just not going to listen to that.
Such a good question, and it is hard. I will say that's part of the reason we've created FlowSavvy, because things happen. You don't follow the schedule. I'm a calendar person. I use my calendar all the time. I stray from my calendar every single day, which is why it's so important to have a flexible schedule and you can have it moving around. So that's why we created FlowSavvy. But let's talk about the first question, which was, why the importance of putting it on the calendar in the first place. So I want you to imagine 2 people. You've got like Sally, Alex. You overhear them talking about how they are thinking about their goals. And you hear Alex say something like, this year I really want to get better at practicing guitar. So I'm gonna find an hour here or there, practice guitar. Cool. Okay, now you overhear Sally saying, I really want to get better at guitar this year. I have blocked off on my calendar 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. on every Wednesday. Who do you think is going to do it? Or at least has the most likelihood of doing it? Because it is hard to stick to that time, but Sally has that plan in place where she gets to 2 p.m. on Wednesday and she says, I already have this time blocked out. It's 2 p.m. I know I have time for it because I can see on my calendar everything else has its place as well. So that's one thing that helps, just seeing everything that has its place. So I really think it's important to put it on the calendar, and then sticking to it. How do we stick to it? Like I said, it is hard. Things change all the time. But I'll tell you one of the things we've done with FlowSavvy to make this a little bit easier for people. It's hard having internal deadlines for yourself. And so what we've done in FlowSavvy is we have this automatic color coding system where things, if you have plenty of time for everything, you throw everything into your calendar and it gets planned onto the calendar automatically. If you have plenty of time for everything, all your tasks are going to be green. You're in the green. You're doing fine. When things start getting closer to their deadline, then we'll start color coding things a little bit differently. So things start turning orange. If they're getting close, that means you don't have much time to push them back. And then when they're going to miss their deadline, then we show them as red. So it gives people that visual cue. The way I think about this is, imagine, you run a business, so this is going to make sense. You have to make data-driven decisions. And it's really hard to look at a table. Imagine like a Google Sheet table, just a spreadsheet of data. And you're trying to figure out, okay, what's the action item that we can take away from this? How do we make a decision based on this data? You can't just look at the data and figure it out. You have to visualize that usually in some way. Look at a graph, put it into a pie chart, something. And that's how I feel about the calendar as well in this automatic color coding. You visualize that raw to-do list data in your time. You put it in your week and you can see, here's what my time looks like. Here are the orange days, here are the green days. You can visualize that time and make better decisions. So it naturally becomes very easy when you see you're about to miss deadlines, you see you're about to not be able to accomplish these things you said you wanted to be able to accomplish. And so it really is just like a mental switch that makes that a lot easier. That's about the best answer I have for that.
No, I want to tell you this, Jacob. Hearing you talk about it, it does get me excited. So I'm not a FlowSavvy user at the time of recording, but I'm willing to bet within a few hours of us finishing recording today, man, I'm excited to sign up for FlowSavvy. But I want to talk about the fact that, to me, the thing that excites me the most hearing you talk about this is you've introduced a to-do list into this conversation. It almost sounds to me like this is a replacement for the to-do list. It's not like I have to maintain a separate to-do list. I just give FlowSavvy my to-do list and it says, okay, here's the game plan. And speaking of that game plan, I guess what excites me the most is it almost seems like a project manager, someone who's holding me accountable and saying, perfect, those are all the things you need to do this week. Well, we know that you've got all these interviews already on Tuesday. We know that you've got meetings on Thursday and you've got internal stuff on Friday afternoon. Here's how we're going to fit all the things in. So I don't have to think about that. Is that a fair way for me to view it? Talk to us about that project manager or accountability component of what it does. And also, hold on, the last thing I want to interject is it a replacement for the to-do list?
Ooh, is it a replacement for the to-do list? I think it's an augmentation of the to-do list. I don't think managing your to-do list is the best way. No. Here's the best way to say it. The to-do list is the input mechanism, in my opinion. The calendar is the output mechanism, meaning you throw everything into the to-do list, and sure, you can look at your to-do list to make sure everything's accounted for. Like if I have client A and I need to make sure I have put everything in my to-do list that needs to be done for client A, sure, I can look at my to-do list. But to figure out what to do, it's pretty overwhelming to look at this massive to-do list and figure out what to do. So that is when we return to the calendar, and the calendar is the output mechanism where we can just say, here's the one thing I need to do next. So I wouldn't say it's a replacement. I would say it's better to use the calendar as figuring out what to do next. And then for your question about the project manager, I would agree. It's kind of like having a personal project manager. So maybe a better way to say it is like having your, it's like an automated executive assistant. I hesitate to say project management because that's something we specifically stray away from in FlowSavvy. Just our position in the market, we try and be specifically for individual time management, not project management and team stuff. So having a personal executive assistant, I think, is the best way to say it.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the fact that you guys are so clear on where it is in the market, the gap that you're plugging. And obviously it's something that all of us need on that personal level. For me, I'll tell you, selfishly, I'm already thinking, I'm trying to balance all these different businesses in my portfolio. I just want to give my entire week to it. So actually, let's use that as an example, Jacob, because I can see FlowSavvy right now. I can see you guys have probably the best animated GIFs that I've seen on a homepage or a business's website. So I immediately, even without using your tool, I can get a sense of how it works, but listeners can't see what I can see right now. So I'd love for you to walk us through a sample workflow, whether it's I guess we'll use to kick a week off. So it's Sunday night. I'm trying to plan the rest of my week so that I can wake up on Monday morning and hit the ground running. What's that workflow look like, and what's FlowSavvy actually going to do for me?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing that you would want to do is you've got your other tools that you already use. Maybe that's Google Calendar, Outlook, iCloud if you're an Apple user. So the first thing, we need to let FlowSavvy know about those things so that FlowSavvy can schedule around the things you've already scheduled. It needs to schedule around your life. So we'll connect your Google Calendar, let's say for this example, and that's going to pull in all of your events. So for example, this interview is a fixed event. It's going to pull that in and it's going to know not to schedule anything during this time. The next thing you would want to do is put in your to-do list. So if you're using Apple Notes like I was, or on my computer, I have OneNote up here as well. I have just a bunch of things I want to do, and you just brain dump. This is the brain dump phase. You type in the title, the duration. So let's say, for example, I think it's going to take me 2 hours, and then you say when you want it to be done by. This is the due date as well. So you give those are the basic things. There's other options as well, but that's really all you need to give to the app, and you do that for all your tasks, and then you really don't have to think about much other than that. It puts everything into your calendar according to your personal hours, work hours. So I can say this is a work task, this is a personal task, and we can have that balance, that separation. And it's going to create your schedule for you. Now, creating the schedule is honestly kind of easy. Like, some people look at it and say, I could just do this myself. It might take 30 minutes, but I'll just put everything into my calendar. I like having that control. The problem starts coming in where, let's say a day later or 2 days later, you have this 2-hour meeting that comes up, or you just get behind, something took longer than you thought, or hey, a camping trip came up this weekend. I want to go on this camping trip. How do I rearrange all my time blocks? So that is where FlowSavvy really shines, because you can just add this camping trip. Let's say I'm just going to block out Friday and Saturday, and that's all I do. I don't have to move anything. It just moves all of my time blocks to this week or pushes them off to next week if they can still fit next week. And just gives you your new schedule. So that's where the power of it comes in. And then next week, it just gets easier. Next week, it's Sunday night, you're planning your next week. Instead of like this hour-long weekly planning session, you just look through your list and say, everything's in here. I'm just going to trust this schedule because it already knows how I can get all this done with the time that I have.
Yeah, I love that sample work case. And the fact that you brought up a really important point, which is if I want to override it, I change my mind halfway through and I want to go on that camping trip. I love that flexibility. That to me is something that you guys illustrate so powerfully with FlowSavvy. I want to put you on the spot here because you clearly know a lot about your space, your industry, even beyond just the work that you guys are doing with FlowSavvy. What are some of those things that people have tried before they end up becoming FlowSavvy evangelists? Because like I said, reading your testimonials and the reviews that people have about the impact of how FlowSavvy has changed their workflow and their weeks, it's really powerful. But I also know there's a million different productivity and time planning tools on the marketplace. So Jacob, what are some of those things that people try before they end up becoming big adopters of time blocking, and specifically how FlowSavvy can help with that?
Yeah, the first thing is I think a lot of people don't realize that automatic time blocking exists. So there are a lot of people that I think would benefit from that, but where they usually start is with a to-do list. They'll start with one of the probably hundreds of thousands of to-do list apps, and that's great. But like I said, kind of very similar to my story, where that eventually gets to a point where it's very overwhelming to manage this to-do list. Then you have to start thinking about your time and when am I going to get all this done? How am I going to get all of this done? So there are some really fantastic time blocking tools out there. And then there's also other productivity methods that I'm personally not a fan of, but I know a lot of people really like. So I know a lot of people use the Eisenhower matrix, which is a way to prioritize your tasks. So you can say, is something urgent or not urgent, and is it important or not important? That's a really good way to figure out what you need to do now, what you need to schedule for later, what you should not be working on. So that one's good. We haven't baked that into FlowSavvy because we have a very focused feature set. So that's something people try though. And then another thing is taking the to-do list, but just using timers basically. So this idea of a Pomodoro timer, you do 25 minutes of work, 5 minutes of no work. And that by itself, the combination of those might give you the motivation you need, might give you the discipline and structure you need to get through your list. And then some people will move into trying calendars. And a lot of people, I will say, a lot of people stay there. You can get calendars to work very, very well with bigger blocks of time. So not as granular as what FlowSavvy is doing, so that you don't have to move everything around constantly. But if you're doing like 3-hour time blocks, 4-hour time blocks, and batching things together, like you were talking about batching or day theming, that's really easy to keep up with in a calendar. When people start switching to FlowSavvy is when they want the granular control and the assurance that I'm going to give it everything that I need to do, the exact times and everything, and I want to see, am I going to be able to fit all of this in given my personal hours, work hours? Like, do my actual tasks fit, not just the idea of working on tasks for a certain amount of time every week? Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure it makes sense. Jacob, I actually think all of these answers really exemplify the fact that you're disciplined not just with time management, but really in the way that you think for life, and especially in the way you think about business. Because hearing you talk about your feature set, for example, and even when we talked about, I talk about project manager, and you're saying, no, we know who we are and we know what we want to be. It's such a disciplined approach to business and strategy. How do you maintain that, especially in the software world? Our listeners love SaaS companies. They love those types of solutions because you're making so many different decisions. Oh, and at the same time, you've got tens of thousands of users across the world. And so with that in mind, Jacob, I want to tap into that disciplined mind of yours. How the heck do you figure out what features to roll out, what not to roll out from a strategy perspective, who it is that you want to be with your company? I'd love to tap into that side of your brain.
Absolutely. Yeah. How we figure out which features we're putting in the app. That's a great question. Something we've been very bad at in the past, a long time ago, and we were forced out of necessity to get better at this. So, first of all, the reason that we try to be focused is because it is out of necessity. Think about the productivity space. Think about the productivity app space. Like if you look on the App Store, just go type in productivity app or to-do list, calendar app, something. It is going to be extremely saturated. And so we've definitely had to make very sure that we're carving out a very specific niche in that market. We understand it's saturated. So that's why we're looking at automated calendaring. This is specifically for busy calendar-oriented people that are doing individual type work. We know that if we stray from that, we're going to start entering into other people, into other apps territory, and we're losing our big differentiator. So especially in the productivity space, it's kind of out of necessity. We have to have that differentiator. As far as I was going to talk about the features, like what features we try, how we decide on features. So at the start, it was kind of qualitative. We would talk to people because we didn't really have the critical mass that we could get feature requests. And so we would interview users, talk to friends, think about what they would want, and we would kind of just make decisions. We made a lot of wrong decisions in that time period. Once we got to the point where we were able to take a lot of feature requests and get just the most popular ones, work on those, iterate on those, and then actually A/B test them, that was the best indicator for us of whether something should stay in the product or not. So, for example, a priority feature, we were very against a priority feature for years. And when I say priority feature, I'm talking about saying whether a task is, should I do this as soon as possible? Is it high priority, normal priority, or low priority? We were so against this because we want it to be as simple as possible. Just tell the app when you want this to get done by, and we'll figure it out. Don't worry about it. But a lot of people were complaining about that. And so that quickly rose to the top of the feature request board. So we looked at that and we're like, dang, maybe we need to look at this. Maybe we need to try this. So we tried it, took several months of development and figuring out the best way to do this in a simple way that still matched the FlowSavvy mindset. Then we A/B tested it. And that's when we realized how wrong we were. It was something crazy, like it doubled conversion rate or something. It was insane. So A/B testing is our biggest tool right now for deciding what goes in the feature set or not.
Yeah, I love that because it's true for all of our businesses, whether we have a software product or not. What I'm really hearing from you, Jacob, is even that acceptance of, hey, what I think matters to other people may or may not be true. Let me just put it into the marketplace and let them decide. So huge kudos to the way that you guys are growing FlowSavvy with the end users as the ultimate priority. I love the way that you're rolling that out. I feel obliged to ask you because unfortunately, I'm going to be a broken record in all of 2025. Everyone wants to know about AI and all the different ways and how it's impacting work. So Jacob, you not only have the lens of your own business and your own industry and your customer base, but you're also a brilliant software engineer. You can build really cool things. So with all of those different hats on, how's AI factor into all this stuff, whether it's within the scope of FlowSavvy or just how it's helping you guys grow as a business as well?
Sure, yeah, I'll talk about it in the context of FlowSavvy because this is a common misconception in the world of auto scheduling. So AI is awesome. AI is very, very powerful. It can do some insane things. It's not necessary though for some things. So, for example, and I say that because we get a lot of people that are searching, they're searching on Google or whatever for an AI planner. That's very cool that the existence of, or the popularity of things like ChatGPT and stuff has created a surge of interest in AI, and people are starting to think, what other kinds of things can I do with AI? So AI calendar is one of those things. Now that they know about this crazy technology that we have, they start thinking about, they're looking at their calendar and they're like, I bet AI could help with this because now they know about AI and how popular it is. So they're like, I think there's probably a product out there. So they look up AI Planner, and that's very cool by itself. I will say that. But I think a common misconception is that it has to be AI and that AI is going to outperform anything else in any category, which may be true if you have enough data for it. I don't think we have enough calendar data at the moment to make AI calendars as good as something like ChatGPT. But so the reason I'm saying this is because at FlowSavvy we use a very carefully designed algorithm so that it's very predictable. It's not doing any of the AI black magic, black box stuff. You always know exactly what's going to happen. It's a deterministic algorithm, meaning with the same inputs, it gives the same exact output every single time. So if something's high priority and it's due at this time, it's going to come before something that's low priority and due at this time, if that makes sense. So the plus side to that is it's very fast and it's very intuitive, which is it's the purpose of FlowSavvy. We want to make auto scheduling as intuitive and easy to use as possible. We want people to be able to just pick it up and use it like a regular calendar. And I think it would be a little hard to make that happen when some of the AI magic is going on. So that's currently where we stand on that. It's very, very possible that we introduce an AI layer in the future that just works in conjunction with our algorithm, because there still are constraints that you have to hit. We can't just let AI go and try and make your calendar, because as we've seen with something like ChatGPT, there's a lot of hallucinations, and we can't allow that with calendaring. Like we just can't make mistakes on the schedule. So we're currently in the algorithm. We're currently using the algorithm, but at some point we may introduce an AI layer to that.
Yeah, I really appreciate those insights, Jacob. It's really valuable hearing the way you think about these. I'll give full transparency behind the scenes of the show is that we've plugged a lot of our episode data into ChatGPT and asked it to put together kind of a start here resource guide for listeners so that if you're struggling with sales, it'll tell you this episode, we talk about these things. And Jacob, to your point, it totally made up some episodes. I thought to myself, I've never interviewed that person. We've never had that episode. And then I Googled these people. It's totally fictitious people. So yes, right. I love the fact that you guys are sticking with what works and you realize the importance of getting it right rather than just integrating AI, because everyone's integrating AI this year and it's making everything sexier when the reality is it doesn't do a better job. So I really appreciate those insights. And by the way, listeners, you can start doing all of these things for free. You can start using FlowSavvy for free. We're going to drop those links in just a minute. But before we get there, Jacob, I always love asking this question at the end of interviews, and that is, what is your one best piece of advice? You are not only well-versed in all things time management and productivity, but you're also growing an incredible business that you're creating the product itself for, and it's incredible what you guys have launched at FlowSavvy. So you're navigating your own waters of continuing to grow FlowSavvy. So with that in mind, what's that one best piece of advice that you want to leave listeners with today?
Okay, Brian, you're going to hate me because you probably get this all the time in the entrepreneurial world, but I think it's so powerful, and I have a really powerful personal experience with this. So the one piece of advice I have to give is just start, because when we started with FlowSavvy, we were students. This was a side project. We knew nothing about business, literally nothing. This was our first venture, so knew nothing about business, nothing about coding, nothing about marketing, sales, nothing. And this came out of an idea. We're trying to solve our own problem, and we're like, I think I'd taken one coding class at that time. So I was like, let's try it. Let's just make something. And at that point, it was just like, let's see what happens. And now it's our full-time job. So that's everything else comes after that. But the most important thing is just start.
Yes, I love that advice. Jacob, I'll tell you what, as cliche as it is important advice, and it hits us all at different times. Even if we hear it 500 times, I still hear that advice and it sparks me to say, maybe it's this idea that I have, or maybe it's something else. And it's just that encouragement. I wish you said just do it, because Nike cuts us a monthly check every time our guests say that. No, I wish. But it's true. It's this simplistic advice that we need to take to heart. And I think that it also shows, Jacob, it's so much of the way that you operate as an entrepreneur entrepreneur is simplicity. There is so much value in simplicity, whether it's through what FlowSavvy does, through the way that you're building FlowSavvy, through the way that you personally operate. I think it's so brilliant how much you've shared with us here today. So with that in mind, I teased a little bit about the fact that FlowSavvy is free, but I'd love for you to drop those links for listeners. Where can they find FlowSavvy? Why is it free? How can they count on it to be free? And how the heck can we start using this to change our weekly workflows and our lives and businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best place to find it is going to be on our website, https://flowsavvy.app. And yeah, it is free right now. That might change in the future. That's how we're doing it right now, because we want this to be very accessible to people, especially when we started as students. It would have been very difficult for us to jump into a paid product right off the bat without even knowing if this is what we wanted. So we want this to be very accessible for people. And so that's what we're currently doing. But yeah, flowsavvy.app, best place to find us. And then we also have in the app, there's a help center where you can reach out and we'll get back to you.
Yes, and listeners, you already know the drill. We're making it as easy as possible for you to find that link down below in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode. Super easy to remember though, flowsavvy.app, or you can click right on through from the show notes. Super easy. You can get started for free. You don't have to enter a credit card. You don't have to enter anything. Just get started. Check it out. If you've never done this, we're always on the hunt for ways to get that edge, to optimize our weeks, to optimize our businesses. And this is a very powerful tool that is at your fingertips. And Jacob is one of us. He gets it. He's a fellow entrepreneur. So Jacob, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Brian. This has been awesome.